Hello, welcome back to Imperfectly Permaculture. I'm Destiny and I live and grow in Western Maine in USDA Growing Zone 4B. I am outside today on this gorgeous late May day, and I wanted to talk today about the first permaculture principle. I'm hoping to do a series of videos addressing each of these principles, and not just on what each of the principles is, but more specifically how I think about it and how I apply them to the work that I do here. So principle 1 is observe and interact. And I think the observation part is really pretty easy. For someone like me, I am observing all the time. So a lot of times this is presented initially as spend a full year getting to know your land before you do any major projects or installations. And that's because where the sun is in the landscape changes throughout the seasons. So, summer will be different than winter. Shadows will be cast differently when the trees have their leaves out versus when they don't. It also means that you want to know where the wind and the water moves through the landscape throughout the year. And if you're in a climate like me, where are those last lingering snowbanks? It can also be things like looking for indicator species. So, for example, the back of my lot, I think I've mentioned before, tends to be very wet. So we have a lot of vernal pools in the springtime. And then in terms of indicator species, there's red maples, ash trees, winterberry holly, cinnamon and sensitive ferns, and a lot of sphagnum moss. And those are all members of the hardwood seepage forest community. So that means that there's water near the surface because there is an impervious layer under the soil, and that means that the soil there is probably loamy to silty and fertile and great quality. It also means it's not a great place for planting most fruit trees or garden plants. Their feet are going to be way too wet and prone to rotting out. So knowing that can impact what you choose to plant and where. But so far I've really focused on the observe half and not the interact half. And observe and interact really is more of like a complete cycle, right? It's a feedback loop. And what I mean by that is that as somebody who is part of the landscape and interacting with the landscape, that as I interact, I need to observe the outcomes of that interaction. So as I impact my space, what outcomes are there? When I plant a tree, how does that change the sunlight or shadow on the land? How does it change how the water flows through the space? When I build my greenhouse on this spot next to me, how does that change the space? Does it create a windbreak with the rhododendrons next to it? When we coppice a tree, does that change how the plants beneath grow? Does that increased sunlight allow new plants to come up where previously they had been suppressed? So, and as I make those observations, I then take new actions to sort of shape things the way that I want them to. And so taking the time to really observe, though, can help you to choose the right actions in your garden. So be patient, recognize that big changes to the landscape can have consequences that maybe you didn't anticipate. So, trying not to do too much at once, because you really want to see how each action impacts things. So that's my thoughts today on principle number 1. I'm going to try to keep these fairly brief each time, and hopefully this weekend I will have a chance to take you on another, perhaps more brief tour of the garden and mini orchard and food forest as things change in this season, as we enter towards late spring, early summer, and there's lots of new growth. Thanks for watching. If you have any thoughts on what Principle 1 means to you, feel free to share them in the comments, and I will see you again soon.